until 6
No,
p.m. or
I've started it a few seconds ago so that you can double check.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Good evening, all out there, and welcome to our Azure Dev Meetup Munich, and where we do today a recap of Microsoft Build 2020. And I have the honor to welcome our speakers with you. And let me first introduce about what we do today. So, recap of Build 2020, which was a very virtual event, and we shared, or we were honored to have 48 hours fully blown of news and informations all around Azure development, Windows, Microsoft stuff at all for developers. And we have today the goal to discuss with you out there, and for sure between us four, a little bit about these hot shit topics. So, before we do so, I'd love to invite you to take a short survey with us and tell us a bit about you, as usual with that meetup here. So please go to menti.com and use the code I've shown here, and then we're gonna have a short information about you. So get ready, prep, and here we go for the questions about you.
Hi.
Hello.
Is it okay for me to change my profession every time?
Oh yes, for sure.
Today I felt like a developer, so.
Great. So you're raising the digits. That's cool. Oh, look at this. We have data scientists here.
Wow.
Just curious. That's a nice one. Best job ever.
Curiosity is mandatory for our line of work, I think so.
That seems to be so, George. You're right. Well, what about the others? How many participants do we have here now?
22 people in the call already.
Okay, then I'd love to see the little man in the lower right corner with the 22, please. Then we'll move to the next slide.
Or else it's 2 hours here.
2 hours looking at the pie chart, right?
Let me just get a beer.
The thing is that the YouTube stream is maybe a bit behind, so if somebody joined from there, it takes a while to get there. Okay. Okay, let's move on. Here we go. This software is awesome, but they change, for what reason ever, their behavior on how to use.
Need to keep you on your toes. Oh wow, lots of new people to Azure.
Yes.
Very nice.
Great to have you here. I hope we can give you some information useful for you. 2 less, 1 left. Reach 15, that's nice. Shall we go over to the next?
Sure.
Let's do so. So if you watched the MSBuild, what literally was your highlight of announcements or sessions or happenings during Build 2020? Share that with us and let us know. Thomas, do you have a favorite moment of Build 2020?
For me, definitely Cosmos DB announcements, because those will save me a lot of money.
Thorsten,
I'll get to that later as well. Interestingly, you can't enter a .NET in the answer. You can just spread net.
Seems that the dash is possible. Thorsten, your favorite moment was what?
Yeah, obviously it was in the Kubernetes space, so there were a lot of announcements regarding Windows containers, which I have a certain opinion about. But yeah, one of the biggest or most important announcements for me is the public preview for Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes. So that's quite a game changer for a lot of big enterprises or organizations in, maybe all over the world, but especially for the German market, who is a little bit behind when it comes to cloud adoption at all. So I think that one was really interesting.
Was there a funny moment for you as well?
Funny moment, yeah. The first time I think it was Scott Hanselman got interrupted by the kids, but it was already scripted, I guess. So it was funny for the first time, but the upcoming 100 kids interrupting the sessions were a little bit too scripted, right?
Yeah. Well, I'd loved following Scott because he was doing all that whoop here, whoop, especially when he showed up with the Win Package Manager and all that stuff. That was really fun listening to him at that stage. So. Then,
but it's interesting to get his some of his insights about how many time actually was allocated to prepare the talks. It was about weeks to get those talks aligned, as we saw them last week, right?
Right. Yeah, it was a bunch of work, I guess. But there were accidentally mutes and so on inside. It was really fun to see that it wasn't that much scripted, but that you could see that there were humans working, doing a cool format for us. And by the way, I see that we have here full-blown highlights, and it was .NET 5. We have Cosmos DB, Maui, WSL2. That's cool. Sharp 9.
People from the .NET meetup, obviously.
Yeah,
with
looks like
some things.
Docker on Docker on Windows 10 Home. Yes, I really appreciated that one as well. Code Spaces. It's also awesome. Okay, let's go to the last one. If there are any questions regarding Build 2020, please note it down here so that we can discuss that. If you don't want to do that now, please follow up with us in the chat. I promise we go and see Blazor. Or was it you, George? We're gonna monitor the chat as well, so that we always will see what happens there to cover your questions if we are able to. And for sure, you can always unmute yourself, as this meetup is dedicated to be a discussion round. We invite you all to discuss with us and join us, and let's have a funny moments and very informational discussions here. I guess there are many opinions out, and I get not enough.
Yeah, the input fields in Mentimeter is really it's like 25 letters or something. So you can't write .NET, you can't write C#. It's really annoying.
Okay, got it. I will put that feedback towards the company building that tab.
Okay,
cool. Okay. Oh, that was. I know the voice. Jota.
Yes, precisely.
Welcome to the meetup. Nice to get your voice here. To my fellow friends, the 4 of us who are already here, Jota is one of our, let's say, alumnis of the meetup already, because he is joining us several times and supporting us with his speeches about artificial intelligence. I appreciate it very much that you're here.
My pleasure.
You can back us.
I actually didn't have all the time that I wanted to see all the build sessions. So I was like, oh, I'll join the meetup.
That's a nice one. Cool.
But that's also why I proposed this, so someone can explain to me all the changes in .NET, basically.
Okay, great one. Okay, enough of this stuff. Thanks for joining us for this short survey. This helps us a lot to understand what we're going to achieve with you tonight. Thanks for that. Make some noise out there. So screenshot you by watching and following us, or photograph your setup while you're watching our meetup and following us. Please Twitter that, LinkedIn, everything's available. Don't miss to subscribe for our YouTube channel, where this stream will also land in and will stay there, so that you can follow up with it later and afterwards. This makes us growing and will support us to be here for you for the next few years. And if you don't know yet, the Azure.NET or the Azure Dev Meetup is now 1 year old. So happy birthday to us.
Happy birthday.
Now, let's welcome our speakers here. We have Thorsten Hans. Hello, and say a few words about you.
Yeah, my name is Thorsten. I work as consultant at ThinkTecture in Germany, and I mainly focus on cloud native computing with Kubernetes in Azure and on infrastructure and as code and all the topics around that cloud developer story.
Cool. So then we have there Thomas, my fellow co-organizer and friend. I must say a few words about you.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we co-founded the Azure Dev Meetup. Yeah, almost exactly a year ago. And by day, I'm a consultant doing a lot of Azure stuff for Media Lesson.
Great. Last but not least, George, say something about you. And we welcome you as a very special friend of the München.net meetup. And we're happy to have you here to do this shared meetup with you.
Thank you, Ralph. It is always a pleasure and an honor to do meetups together. We have a very fine cooperation, and I really like that. So I'm George. We already said I'm the organizer of Munich.net meetup. I'm also working here in Munich as a principal engineer, software architect at Tech Cycle, where my main focus is, of course, .NET, Azure, and microservices. Yeah, I don't think we should say a lot of ourselves because we have so many topics today.
Oh, yes, you're right.
I'm really, yeah.
Okay, Jota, I've mentioned you already. So Jota is one of the Microsofties joining us tonight. So he will aid us with the artificial intelligence stuff. Hopefully, we do have 3 topics with that. And I guess he can do that out of a scratch, right, Jota? I'm just kidding.
I
It's
told
all good.
you I didn't have time.
All good, man. All good. It is just that you can maybe have sharing your opinion here. That would be very nice.
Yeah.
Cool thing. Okay, so let's start over. To do so, yeah, please. What was the question? No question?
I think this was by mistake, maybe.
Okay, no prob. So let's say we can go and start. Now the funny thing will start. And nice. So for now, as discussed, MSBuild 2020 is over. Let's do a short recap. The Twitter tag and so on you can have by each others, and each other of us will share their Twitter tags as well, so that you can reach out to them directly. I won't say anything more. Torsten, I guess that one's dedicated for you, right?
Ralph, I think you need to share the PowerPoint in Teams as well.
Oh, that's
exactly, because we don't see it in Teams.
That's a funny thing, because I was hoping that
I see it on the live stream.
I was hoping that this will also be transferred towards the channel. I will for a sec with me. You say I have to share.
I mean, you don't have to, but
it would be nice.
only the 5 viewers on YouTube currently know what's going on.
Oh, good. Okay, so I hope you can see now a bit more.
Not yet.
Not yet. Technically, it's a nightmare.
What are you referring to?
Oh, damn
okay,
it.
now we see the presenter's view, if that's okay for you.
It is okay for me, but it's not the one I wanted to share. It's really a... Okay. Go with that screen. We go.
Yeah, cool.
That's the
Okay.
nice one, right? Okay. So now you can see it, and let's do the recap. And Torsten, now I hand over to you. I hope it's okay for you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was one announcement that was, I didn't recognize that actually during while watching the build sessions, but I got the attention about Learn TV a day or two after MS Build during the public holiday in Germany. So what it is, it's actually a real TV channel where they live stream certain shows or interviews. There you have. So I don't have to share my screen. Great. And you can just tune in and watch. And I think if you just hit the play button on the big TV in the top, then you should see. I was in Learn TV a couple of minutes ago. There was a show taking place about cognitive search. Don't know if that's still the case. Let me double check where he is. No, he's in a storage account. Maybe he's setting up indexing something from storage accounts. So that's actually pretty cool. And I reached out to the folks at Microsoft in Redmond and asked if they are willing to provide a dedicated app for that, like, iPad app, I don't know, Android app, Apple TV app, so that I can really, sit down on my couch in the living room and just tune in and watch if I have some spare time. I want to, perhaps catch up with all the news from Build, because that's the go-to resource right now to get all the latest, visual content, let's say it that way. And it was quite. I like the way how they changed Microsoft Learn at all. I mean, if I recall correctly, I did my first certification 14, no, not that much, almost 14 years ago. Back in those days, it was quite different. And so I went through one of the Learn modules a couple of weeks ago, and I really enjoyed the experience. And I hope they, continue building a kind of TV channel to do some tech education. That will be a really nice one for me.
It's like a Learn YouTube for us, right? Just from Microsoft.
Yeah, exactly. And because it's GitHub is Microsoft, npm.js is Microsoft, so it's not just tied to, let's say, Windows desktop development. It's it's targeting all the different angles, and you already have all those big logos on the screen right here. So it's about the cloud, it's about Blazor, it's about everything. And I think that has potential to get the go-to resource if you want to get latest and greatest news.
For sure.
From developers' perspective, of course, yeah.
Cool. That's really a nice one.
Yeah, a quick one, a small one, but it definitely got my attention because I like consuming new stuff by looking at a short 5-minute video before actually diving into documentation and stuff like that and do some hands-on.
That's cool.
Yeah, I think the question is whether or not this will replace Channel 9.
Well,
good question.
That's a good question.
And I don't have any inside information. I'm just asking. I wonder about that myself.
Yeah, it's a valid question. I mean, it's I think it addresses something I recognized when looking at our TV consumption, let's say it that way, because we just have like Netflix, we have Amazon Prime, and all those paid subscriptions. But we find ourselves at home, browsing through that big, huge catalog and not sure what to look at right now. So I think Learn TV is just something where you can just, go there and jump in and watch what's currently being streamed. So they have a catalog, and I think Channel 9 will perhaps become that catalog. But there is always something going on live.
Yeah.
And so, frictionless, just tune in, watch it.
Have
They
fun.
can use whatever has an Xbox app first.
Cool. George, I guess the next topic is for you, right? So shoot.
Well, if the next topic is Blazor, I think many people were waiting for that, right? We were expecting to see what's happening with Blazor and how it will go forward.
Yes.
Truth is, ASP.NET Blazor is now released not only for the server version, we had that since .NET Core 3.1, but also with .NET running in the client, and that is in all modern browsers using WebAssembly. For sure, no more JavaScript, right? I mean, now we can be full stack developers with .NET only and nothing more. This is quite a revolution, especially for, I wouldn't say JavaScript haters, but anyway, for people that don't like JavaScript that much, implicit coercion, variable hosting and stuff. So anyway, the title, ASP.NET Blazor allows developers to build now interactive UIs with C# instead of JavaScript that now supports WebAssembly. This added capability, let's say, means developer can build client-side web apps that run completely in the browser with .NET. Since they are compiled applications, they run faster and they use less memory than JavaScript, which is also quite cool, right? One other thing that I really like is that now you can use C#, you can use .NET to write progressive web applications. Progressive web apps are web applications that are regular web pages as we know them, but they appear to the user like traditional applications, and you can do all that now with Blazor WebAssembly. I have a sample ready. If I can share my screen,
You can.
We start
For sure.
And
go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Let me find out how to share my screen first. Yes, share desktop, isn't it? Just desktop window. Can you see me now? Your entire screen? No,
Not yet.
Share. Now I am sharing. The progressive web app of Microsoft Teams, it's quite different than the actual Microsoft Teams. It has a few different, like sharing screen and stuff. So can you see my screen now?
Yes.
You can all see you. Super. Now, what we can do, we can just start and create a new .NET Blazor WebAssembly application. Let's just go to D and write .NET new Blazor Phasm. This is the template name, and let's name it, I don't know, Blazor test. Wait a few minutes. When we are done, I think it will not be more than a few seconds. It's done already. We can go in that new folder and run our. And we need a few seconds, hopefully no more than that. Yeah, it's ready. We can now see our app. Why is that Edge is not starting? I don't know right now. Okay, hope you can see Edge.
You have stopped. Wait! You've stopped this the screen sharing.
I stopped it.
Yes.
How did I stop it?
Accidentally. Yes. George, are you back? Guess we lost him.
Maybe. Yeah, he kicked his entire connection. I mean, but perhaps that's a good point for actually raising some questions, right?
Yeah.
So I haven't been looking into Blazor at all. A couple of folks at our company did so. So what I get is, of course, you can leverage your existing C# knowledge to start building something for the client. That's let's say a SPA, single page application built with .NET compiled to WebAssembly and executed in a browser. That's fine. But I mean, in the end, you need JavaScript, right? Because every library that you want to use that is out there in the wild has a JavaScript interface, and so you need to, interact with it in some way, or is there like a bridge already built in Blazor WASM that you can use to, I don't know, call into JavaScript functions from pure C#? Those are questions, popping up when I think about that Blazor thing. And if I remember correctly, then WebAssembly is still limited to one thread. So there are still some limitations, but I definitely get the point why Microsoft is, building that and trying to catch up with all the front end movement beyond the desktop. Let's say that way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting from my point of view to see who is excited about Blade. So basically, there's two types of people: those who are already doing like Angular development and React and Vue, and they don't really get the benefits, I guess, that much. And then there's the people that only have written ASP.NET and C# backend code for most of their days, and those people seem to be way more excited about about Blazor than people that have already maybe this extensive knowledge with single page applications and the frameworks.
Welcome back, George.
Yeah, I'm finally back. I don't know, Teams crashed.
The power of Blazor.
Yeah.
Do you want to
Obviously.
share your screen again?
Yeah, let me share my screen again. I had to let me share screen 1. Okay, so where are we? We were here, and I think I had my Edge open to this URL. Tell me, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Super. Hopefully it will not crash right now. Yeah, we are here. That is the default app, let's say the Hello World app with the counter and the fetch data. What is the important and nice thing I wanted to show you? It's, first of all, this part, you can see the entire WebAssembly here on the client side, and then this one. Now, what's this one? I can open my app. I think it was D when I created some time ago, and this is going to show you something very cool. I will try to be fast so Teams will not crash again. So here is the fetch data, not right now. The Razor page that fetches that data. As you can see, we're injecting HTTP client in the top, and we are using an instance of this HTTP client to actually ask for whether JSON file, which is a static file here, but doesn't matter anyway. We are using .NET to ask for this file. But this, as you see here, if I refresh the page, and every time I click fetch data, JavaScript is actually asking for the data to come, not .NET. There is no call to any controller on the other side to get the data, to get the weather JSON file. It is JavaScript that actually making this call, which is very, very impressive and nice, and proves that everything now runs in the client, right?
So the C# code is being translated into JavaScript calls?
Right now, for the HTTP client, this is exactly what's happening. But even if we load .NET assemblies, .NET standard assemblies, of course, you can see that they will be ported here. They will be transferred here and built here using ahead of time compiler, and you will see the actual calls from the browser. So everything is happening on the browser. No call to whatsoever to our app here. No controllers here, no nothing. All the action is happening here. And this is why you can have that as a progressive web app. You can save that as an application and work offline. Of course, offline means that this could be fetched, right? It's an impressive step on my side, and that many people were waiting. We knew the server side part of Blazor, and we knew that this was working very fine. We start playing with it, but to be honest, having the server side, having Blazor running on the server side and translating all the calls to JavaScript and bringing them on the client was one thing, and that was not very attractive for many. But having the actual assembly running on the browser using WebAssembly, this is a huge step. This means we can completely skip from now on writing any JavaScript, hopefully, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, George, I raised the question while you were reconnecting, but I think you still have to deal with JavaScript in order to use existing libraries in the front-end ecosystem, right?
Yes, that is correct. For libraries, you can, and this is a cool thing actually, because you might have existing libraries in the front end. You might have JavaScript libraries written in any language, and if you want to interact with them, of course you can interact with them. There is this JavaScript interop, let's say. You can easily call JavaScript APIs and libraries, so you are free to use JavaScript. They are interconnected, let's say, but on the other hand, you have the ability, if you don't want to use any libraries ready, or if you don't want to make any JavaScript calls, to use C# only.
So will we be seeing lots of new Razor components then to be used basically instead of the JavaScript front end?
Yeah, I think there are already, you have the ability to share code and libraries, and this is one of the cool things. You can use existing .NET libraries written in .NET Standard, but you can start writing your own libraries, right? I think there are many frameworks like the Pyral that I had a meetup some days ago about Blazor and Pyral, that they are already adjusted to using Blazor, and as time passes by, we will see more and more of this. There are vendors already like Telerik and DevExpress and SyncFusion, many of them that are already adapting to this new world, let's say, because we can be full stack developers without JavaScript. Of course, again, as you are totally right, we will probably never forget JavaScript. We would need it, but nevertheless, some of the complicated things, some of the things that we were making our lives difficult, we can solve them right now with Blazor. We should not forget that it's open source, right? You have the code there. You can see everything. You can see all the best practices. It's not something hidden. Open source really changed our world anyway, of being able to use to see how to write our piece of code with the most optimized way. So this again follows Blazor. It has already an active community. There are many awesome Blazor projects started that they are either small ones, small controls that you can add, for example, like this menu here, the counter and fetch data menu, or more complicated menu with tutorials, and there are books already authored. Everything you would need to start. Yeah, I can understand that regarding controls and components, let's say it might be a step back, but this is a fresh new start, right? And it seems that the community, it's very active around it. So I really hope it will start and be the best next thing.
So that means Blazor is open source as well?
Blazor is open source. Is open source at free. It's part of the open source.NET platform. It has let me check a minute. It has more than 60,000 active OSS contributors, and I think around 4,000 companies. So yeah, it is free and it is open source.
Nice one.
Is this also maybe going to be a vehicle to modernize like legacy apps and ship them through the browser, or is this something that's not really in the scope of Blazor because you have to do too much rewriting?
Well, of course, you will have to do too much rewriting. You have to think of the benefit, right? To be honest, I think with WinUI also coming, this is something that we will discuss later on. That might be a very cool thing. Start thinking of rewriting your applications. Yeah, you will need to completely rewrite your front end. This is expensive, but on the other hand, you will have a very fresh UI, right? This fluent UI that it's very appealing for everyone. If you are willing to invest on that rewrite, of course. Nevertheless, one cool thing is that there are framework out there that they are used to, let's say, these micro front ends that you are used to create your web application based on small parts, small modules. So you can slowly start migrating each one of those modules to Blazor, and then at some point finally have a completely ready UI built on Razor. It all depends on the money you want to give to rewrite your app, right?
Okay, well, George, that was a nice one. You have several topics on there. The next seems to be C#9, right?
Yeah, it can be very well C#9 because a lot of people were waiting for that. We're waiting for C#9. There were many things announced for C#9. One of the big things, and maybe the most important, was the records. And what is it? Records. It is a lightweight, let's say, mutable type. It is the way, let's say, it is a way of for declaring a whole object to be mutable and have it behave like a value. So up until now, we knew that immutable objects, although they were immutable, we couldn't compare them. But now we can compare them structurally. For me, it seems that records are more like to be seen as data and less than objects, because they can have methods, they can have properties, operations, you name it. And since they are immutable, they can you are allowed, you can compare them structurally for structural equality. Yeah, they can be either value or reference types, and with this immutable type, with this new type, comes a whole new of additions. One of them is the with expressions. So what is it? Let's say when you have an immutable object, like the records that we discussed before, you cannot modify it after creation. That is the meaning of being immutable, right? So what if you want to change it? You can, you just need to copy it. Upon copying it now, this with expression is solving this problem by allowing you to copy and define with object initializer syntax what changes. So you have object A, which is immutable. You want to create object B, which changes one property of that object B, and you can do it by copying it and using object initializer syntax, that with keyword. So other things that happen with C#9 is that they are the pattern matching is improved a lot. There are some additions there. For example, there is no need to declare default identifier in switches. Remember this underscore we had to use? It's gone, no more. There are changes in relational pattern and logical patterns, which means that relational operators like the bigger and smaller can be used as pattern indicators, which is really cool. And you can combine them with relational, we can combine the relational operators with logical operators, the and or the not keyword as a word, which is actually also very cool. One of my favorites also, another change that was announced, is the parameter null checking. Most of us, we had problems with the null reference exceptions, right? Now you can use an exclamation mark, I'm sorry, at the end of your parameter name to throw a null reference exception if this parameter is null, and even if it is a string, of course. What else can I say? I can also say something about the init accessor, which is very cool also. It might have something to do with the records, of course, with all of these binds. Right now, in order to use an object initializer, your properties had to be mutable, right? You couldn't do this if you had an immutable object. which means if you want to change that, if you want to use object initializer, you had to have a mutable object, and that would have the danger, of course, that this object, these properties could change everywhere in your code. The init accessor, something like replacing set, let's say, comes to solve that problem. If you use it, if you use instead of get set, get init, let's say, you will have the ability to use object initializer, but you will not be able to change that property everyone else. So yes to object initializer, no to any other change. Yes to immutability. One last thing, which for some reason, I'm not very fond of, to be honest, but yeah, it's there, and there are more, but I think I try to keep the most important ones, is the target typed new. Up until now, of course, creating a new instance of an object, you had to define the name of that object, right? This is gone. Now you can create a new instance of an object by, and the type of that object, the name will come from the context. For example, if instead of var, you're using the object name you want to create. A lot of changes. I think the most important are the changes about the records, of course, which will change the way we're working, and it's adding a huge tool in working more with data. We live in a data-intensive world, and this is actually a great feature. I'm not an F# expert, but I'm pretty sure that this is a port from F#, all with this with keywords. And there are also other changes, which to be honest, there are so many, which I don't think it's worth mentioning. We are expecting C#9 with .NET 5, unless I'm wrong. This is around November something. Although, if you visit the website, the GitHub for the .NET 9, for all the issues, let's say, for all the tasks that they are agreed to go forward, you will see that the plan is for the 2090. So I'd say that with I'm not very sure about the date. Nevertheless, this is what I know so far. Yeah, I think that is about C#9. I don't know if there is any thing that struck your attention.
Maybe you can leave a few words about .NET 5, because that was one of the requested ones during the intro of our meetup.
Yeah, to be honest, I also saw that, and I was wondering why I remember sending you, right, the most cool topics, some things that I want to talk about, and I was wondering, why didn't I include .NET 5? Maybe because everyone was it was considering that much obvious. I don't know. So yeah, .NET 5. To be honest, .NET 5 is the next .NET Core version, right? We will not have .NET Core 4 because it would be confusing with .NET Framework 4. We will have .NET 5, and that would be the end. This is the beginning of the one and only .NET. There will be no other .NETs, no other .NET versions. Of course, .NET Core, .NET Framework will continue to be supported with security fixes if and whatsoever, but the next cool version will be .NET 5. And that will be the version that will unify all .NET. The schedule for the .NET 5 is November 2020. That will be a GA release. It will not be an LTS. It is predicted the releases will be each November. I don't know why they picked November. They liked it. So somehow, probably the best version, the first version they could reach was November. So November 2020 is .NET 5. November 2021 will be .NET 6, and so forth. It's even numbered release, that is 6, for example, will be an LTS and long-term support release. That means that the schedule of new releases will be predictable. There will be intermediate releases, minor releases, of course, if needed, but the versions you will know that you will go from 5 to 6 and from 6 to 7 and so forth. It's November. I don't know if we need to go into deeper topics about Mono and Core CLR and what's the plan there, but I think since these are we can talk about now about not .NET 5. Maybe we can leave this to be guided by the community. What do you think, Ralph?
Yeah, let's do so. If the community will have questions, I'm pretty sure that they'll come up with a text message or will unmute themselves to shout in the question. Any opinions, Thomas and Torsten?
I'm just really excited to have not to explain anymore the difference between .NET Framework and .NET Core.
That's with .NET 5 then, yeah?
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, that's true. That's a really important one, and I think they struggled a lot with all the marketing and with all the branding stuff that also popped up a couple of days ago on Twitter again. Is it .NET? Is it .NET? How is it written and stuff like that? So it's time to unify the experience also, that you don't have to care about, managing the mono runtime and that runtime and X and Y and Z on your machine to have a unified development experience. And I mean, all of the folks that were doing .NET for years, they know that inside of .NET, you still have like 20 solutions to, get the same thing done, right? If you think about accessing a SQL server, I can't even remember all the different tools and sub-frameworks we had to achieve that since .NET 1.0. So it's time to unify that, yeah.
And one of the most hated tools to get .NET and SQL Server together is the one you're going to tell us next, right? Entity Framework.
The EF Core. Yeah. Well, EF Core again 5. We are there is an effort to follow the .NET versioning system, so it's EF Core 3, 3.1, and now it will be 0.5. It is scheduled to be released the same time with .NET 5, of course, and it's planned to run in any .NET 5 platform, right? Quite a few things to mention there. I picked just a few. We can talk about them or any other question you might have. One of those is the many-to-many navigation properties, which I was expecting it, to be honest, for a long time. It was kind of a pain in the ass, let me say that, to handle that thing, is that skip navigations, right? What is it? The skip navigation properties will allow you to the model, your model, to be used for queries without referencing the underlying join table entity. That will remove some of the complexity of what we had to do before. One of the other important things is that belongs to that family of changes, I would say, the property bug entity types. What that is, which again will remove some of the complexities, that it allows you to use standard CLR types, like for example a dictionary, for entity instances, such that an explicit CLR type is not needed for its entity type. What that will solve us, that will remove a lot of complexity when we're trying to map these to explicit CLR types, our queries to explicit CLR types. There are going to be more changes to help us around some syntactic sugar changes for example, for easily configuring many-to-many relationships. That alone will be a huge improvement, but there is also this another request. I think it was, I was reading that before. It was the third most requested change for EF Core, is the table per type. What is that? It is, let's say, the table per type inheritance could be used to separate to a separate table in the database to maintain data for a non-inherited properties. So, for example, it is a way of representing the inheritance relationship as a relationship for key associations. So we all used to although we should follow compositions, we of course use inheritance to map some of our models, to have some of our models. This inheritance was not being able to map into the models. You will end up having, for example, in SQL Server database, you would end up having a flat representation. With that change now, you will be able to have relationship and map these relationships to another table. That could make it a bit, for example, it could make it a bit easier to read and map what is happening on the database relation with your models. Another thing that many people asked, and I know that I asked it, was the filtered include. You could include the next table. You could use the include method to include any other table that had a foreign key, but you weren't able to use a where syntax to limit how to include, how to bring data from that other table. Now you can do that. It is very helpful. I think it will totally unblock, and it will make, in any case, easier many scenarios that currently require model level filter, or maybe even more complex queries to solve them. One other thing, I think maybe, quite important, that is worth mentioning, it will make our lives easier and more clearer, is that the migration and deployment experience changes. It is an interesting extension that comes with TF Core 5, that the migration and deployment is now done in a separate application. It's not part of the main application as we know it. That thing makes things a bit clearer, I think, to separate the concerns and have different applications to do a different job. Another thing I think last that I might mention is this, you remember this from SQL queries or to table to queries, all these things. There is a progress in the previous version towards this, supporting raw SQL queries, supporting keyless types, supporting related areas. There is a progress. However, there are gaps and inconsistencies there. One thing is happening one way, the other is happening the other way, and this causes a confusion. It's bringing the learning curve quite up, I would say. The goal of 5, and this is something that will happen, is to create a good experience, a unified experience for using all these raw SQL keyless types or related areas. I think on my side, that was the most important things of PF Core 5. I don't know the audience if there is anything else to add. Personally, I'm not using it that much, but there are legacy projects that use SQL Server, so of course PF Core was the choice, and that would make our lives a bit easier in some cases.
Cool. I haven't seen any questions raising. Do you have any?
Does the chat even work?
Sorry?
I'm wondering if the chat even works, because maybe we broke it.
The chat in Teams?
Maybe it's too much information all at once. I don't know. Let's see at the end, right?
The chat in Teams will work. I haven't...
Not for guests, I guess. So
Not for guests?
Yeah, I see that you created a channel meeting, and that the channel meeting chat is only available to team members, and I guess we are not team members, so we are guests. So that's why I guess.
Yeah, that's a funny thing.
What's happening on YouTube? Any questions there?
No, chat is not available there.
Yeah, so not for channel meetings, because we are not members of your team, I guess.
Anyway, you were successful to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I can at least talk to you.
If there are questions, just shout out.
Well, I saw, just by accident, I saw that there was a question in the meetup event. I can maybe read it out loud so that you can also maybe say something to it. I have to get to the event from today.
From Nenad.
Yeah, but I don't know whether it's a
watching this.
Question.
Yeah, there are some questions. Okay, got it. Thanks for mentioning. Too many channels to watch over, I guess. Okay, so watching this, I have some questions. Will the notes be shared? You can have the YouTube video. I guess that's enough.
Yeah, because there are no nodes, right?
Yeah, talking about replacing JS with C#. I'm proficient in Python only, so is this just for .NET C# developers? I guess that's related to Blazor.
Well, I mean, if you're a Python developer, you already have your framework for
Yes.
doing web apps, right?
I would say also the same.
Of course, it could be a nice opportunity to jump to Blazor, but yeah.
I mean, in the end, it's just it's the underlying framework that has to compile against WASM instead of compiling to the actual CPU architecture, right? Because what happens underneath the hood is that you, when you do a system IO file read all text, you know, then it tries to execute that in the sandbox of the browser, and so you hit the limitation of the browser, and so it's just targeting to different architecture basically. And if there's some support going on in whatever programming language, then why not? I mean, C++, we were doing that for years right now, compiling to WASM without having a framework like Blazor. So it's just Microsoft, you know, taking the bet and adding a whole bunch of developer experience to that one and makes it simpler.
Okay. I hope we don't have to monitor Twitter as well. Looks not.
Should get notifications for those.
We should get that from Meetup as well.
Yeah, but their notifications seem to be somewhat broken right now. I guess there's some noticed as well.
Yeah, the announcement didn't work out, right? Okay, you have one last topic left, George, if I'm right.
I think it might be worth mentioning the .NET MAUI, although disclaimer, it will not be part of .NET 5, but I think it's quite important to mention that .NET MAUI will be the evolution of Xamarin Forms, right? Maybe just a few words about it. Well, it is a multi-platform native UI. You can use it to deploy your app in multiple devices across mobile and desktop using a single project, a single code base, not multiple ones. So now the thing is that not .NET MAUI, as I told you, it will be part of .NET 6 and not .NET 5. So it's not a very impressive things to mention. But anyway, we are getting there. The previews, and why? Because the previews will be available, I think, end of 2020, maybe along with .NET 5. So the goals of .NET MAUI, why this thing started. First of all, Xamarin Forms will continue to be actively supported, right? That thing changes there. What is happening though is that .NET MAUI is using customer feedback, early customer feedback, that they are suggesting evolutionary changes and they are implementing those changes. The changes that they are mostly implement and they affect Xamarin Forms, of course, in performance, that is a huge goal. They also improving the simplicity of how you extend your controls, of controls accessibility. They also improve and they contributed the way you can contribute, because it's kind of a very difficult to impossible to do it right now. And one of the nice things that they enable developers the options to use the model view update and Blazor. Of course, this is all going there. One of the nice features, though, that you might be interesting about .NET MAUI when it's out there is that you will not longer need a Mac to build iOS application. You will need one to publish, but you will not need one to build, which is really cool. You just need Windows. I think this is quite early and we don't have much to say about it, but it is something to pay attention, especially since they will support Blazor. next year, or even better, the end of 2020, any developers around Xamarin Forms will want to take a look there. I don't think it will be backward compatible. So yeah, let's see. I don't think it's worth mentioning anything more there. And to be honest, I never even had the chance to step deeper into it and play around with it. So if any one of you knows a bit more about .NET MAUI, please feel free.
Not me, man. I'm sorry.
I think most of the people, most of the developers right now, they don't, because it's in a very early stage. There is nothing to look around there.
There's a question? No, okay. Okay, that's it. That's a wrap. Nice one. Thanks, George, for the insights. Okay,
No problem. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. So the next topics we go to see are AI and responsible, and therein we will show on. It's not especially AI. It goes through machine learning, cognitive services, and so on. So we had put it under the headline AI, and now Jota, it is your stage. No, it's just a kidding. Just wanted to push it back once more. So three things we want to mention within machine learning stuff and cognitive services around, or artificial intelligence around Azure. The very first one is responsible ML. What does responsible ML mean? We're gonna focus on that in a few moments. The second one is Azure Cognitive Search updates, which is to me one of the coolest thing, because Azure Cognitive Search will make some data grabs a bit easier. And then there's one more cool thing, at least, Project Bonsai, which has to do with autonomous, at least.
By the way, Ralph, do you want to share the PowerPoint again?
Yes, I want to share the PowerPoint again.
Because now the nice pictures are coming up, I see.
Where are the pictures coming up?
In the slide deck.
Oh, okay,
just
cool.
refer to the slide deck.
You're right. For a sec with me. Here we go.
Yep.
So these three topics are the point we're gonna point off a little bit. I'll try to be short, because we have plenty of other topics as well. Responsible ML is a way Microsoft wants to enable their customers, so other companies dealing with ML stuff, on doing it on the right way. So they give out, let's say, a guide or a model on how companies or customers can do their machine learning projects. And they have three topics within the responsible ML model. And it starts with understanding, it goes over control, and it goes then at least to protect. Let's start with protect. So what can protect means within machine learning? If you do a machine learning project, you have to take care about all the things and data coming into your machine learning project. You have to take care of if it is individual data, and you want to be sure that the individual data can never be remapped to the origin individual, giving that data out. So you have to have some white noising for your data to achieve that protection instantly for your individuals dealing, giving out their data to you. That's one point, and it's just a tiny bit of that protection they are going to achieve with that program. The next thing is control. And if I say control, it is not that they want to control everything and all around it. Control means that you have to know what you're doing with your machine learning, and that you do that in the right manner. I cannot say that much about control. maybe Jota can jump in here if he has more insights into that. And at the third topic here, it is about understanding. And here, understanding is not meant to be understanding the data you have. It is more or less that your customer using your service has the ability to understand in a transparent way what your data logic and artificial intelligence is doing. And to summarize all that is you need to have trust into machine learning, artificial intelligence, and all that stuff, bringing, let's say, magic into something which is intransparent at a first glance to the customer. And to build up that trust, those three topics are very important to be very transparent to your customer. And you can read more if you go and Google responsible ML to have that at a glance.
Rolf, can I do just one small note
Yeah,
on that?
for sure,
Yeah,
for
so
sure. Go ahead.
What particularly impressed me in this announcement was the understand capabilities. And basically you have features. Imagine you train a model based on data, and we give you some features in Azure Machine Learning Studio to understand if your model is biased, for example, if it's discriminating about men or women or any other group, right? So there's a visual way to explore the data and to understand if your model is biased. And I really, really like that set of features.
Of course, that's a really cool feature because having underrepresented groups inside your data, you are always running into that bias stuff, right? So for sure, you have to be aware of that, and that's also builds up the trust then into Azure or into machine learning or KI, artificial intelligence, and so on, right, Jota?
Yeah.
Cool.
Essential.
Thanks for the hint.
Not a problem.
So the next one is Project Bonsai, and I've already mentioned Project Bonsai is meant to be dedicated for. I have done it wrong. Project Bonsai is done for machine training, right? So that means it shall enable industries whom are more or less, let's say, mechanicals or other industries doing not electrical and informational stuff, to achieve that their machines get intelligence on board. And therefore, it is meant to train that machines using Project Bonsai to bring artificial intelligences or machine learning towards that without having the need to really get that deep dive into all that stuff belonging to machine learning and artificial intelligence. I will keep it with that, and you should definitely have a look onto that project if you're interested and you're one of those industries they're targeting with that. Beside the Project Bonsai, this is just one cool project Microsoft started. There's other cool stuff like the Microsoft Health platform, also bringing on artificial intelligence and machine learning stuff for especially the health sectors. They're really cool topics here. So the last one I'm really on is Azure Search, right? With Azure Search, let me jump back to my first slide. The Azure Cognitive Search has received a few updates, which I really appreciated very much when they came up with that. Because, to my opinion, Azure Cognitive Search allows you with a very cool integration into your application using a search with artificial intelligence inside. And so that they've updated this service means it got a lot better than it was before. Let me jump through a few of that topics. So literally, the Azure Machine integration or the Azure Machine Learning integration is now in preview, and that allows a more cohesive integration with Azure Cognitive Search to tap into Azure Machine Learning as well, which wasn't available before. The other cool thing is that there is a custom ranking for your search results, which gives you the ability to improve your ranking system, or let's say to have the category like a what.
Yeah, we still see the AI slide.
But that's good. I'm not showing anything.
Okay.
So I haven't prepped a slide for that because there was no cool image I could share with that. So go ahead.
Can I put in a question?
Oh yeah, for sure.
That one, because I used Azure Cognitive Search also a lot, and I like the experience that the service gives me at a fairly cheap price. So they updated how I can boost actually results or certain results in the overall results that were returned from Azure Cognitive Search. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, with the domain specific search results then.
Okay, got it. So they put a DSL instead of having that elastic default language, that JSON query boosting nightmare that we have to do before here.
That's it, right?
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, that's it. Literally for AI. If there are questions or you missed the topic, just drop it now.
Well, I think personally that Azure Cognitive Search is definitely a no-brainer if you have some kind of data-driven application where finding information goes beyond just executing a SQL statement that contains several fragments. So that's definitely something that you guys should look into if you haven't tried it out. I mean, it was previously known as just Azure Search, and back in those days, it already had those AI capabilities. So they just aligned the naming of the service. So maybe it's a small hint to also just Google for Azure Search and not just for Azure Cognitive Search, because the rebranding is, I think, a couple of months ago.
Yeah, I think one of the very good examples that I've been showing also the last few months is, and you can also find, for example, the recording from the Ignite session is the example with the form recognizer. That's a cognitive service that's plugged into Azure Search, and gives you a super easy way to extract structured data from PDFs file, which used to be a nightmare.
Yeah.
And you just throw 5 PDFs against the service to learn the structure, and then you can run it against thousands of documents and get super nice JSON out of it with a day's work.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's true. Yeah, they have pretty good indexes there for images. I think for videos too. So that I remember one demo where they were uploading or indexing just a short minute movie or so a short clip where a car drove by, and then they looked for the license plate, and Azure Cognitive Search was able to retrieve that clip from all the index. That's quite impressive. Yeah, so I like this service a lot. Yeah.
Yep. And now it's got a bit better.
It's got even better.
Yeah. Okay, let me jump on. Next topic is Azure infrastructure, and now Thorsten, it is up to you.
Yes, cool. So Azure infrastructure as the overall topic, and there was some announcements regarding Azure Arc that Microsoft, I think, first demoed back at Ignite last year. So with since last week, we were able to use Azure Arc Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes to bring in existing Kubernetes cluster into Microsoft Azure. And as the picture, so I grabbed that picture from the official Microsoft documentation. Okay, so we stopped the sharing, but no.
I'm sorry. I was wondering if you would share.
I will share in a minute, but I just wanted to set the stage, right?
no, I got it.
Okay,
here we go.
Worries. So Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes allows you to bring in external Kubernetes clusters into your Azure or existing Azure subscription. And by bringing in external services like Kubernetes, you can leverage the power that Azure gives you over all services, like, for example, using Azure policies to ensure a certain level of governance for all your services. Or simple things like, putting tags on external Kubernetes clusters to being able to do proper inventory of all your machines and all your services across the globe. So yeah, we just got that announcement that Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes is now in public preview. And what I have prepared, and right now I will share my screen. Let me quickly. That's the other one for code spaces. So you should now see on the left-hand side a big ass terminal, and on the other hand side you should see my Azure subscription. Do you see that?
Yes, we see that.
Okay, cool. So what I've prepared, I have a Kubernetes cluster sitting in DigitalOcean over here. So it's just a simple one with 2 nodes, but yeah, it's somewhere, living outside of my Azure environment. So I can go there and use kubectl. Don't be afraid, I have a couple of aliases mounted in my ZSH shell. So there is K, which is basically kubectl. And as you can see in the top, it's now pointing to Kubernetes DigitalOcean in Frankfurt, and it's called DigitalOcean K8s. So that's basically, give me quick hint over here. The name was also printed in the top. There is the name, right? So I can just do some inventory stuff, and let's say give me all namespaces in that Kubernetes cluster, and you see it's a relatively new Kubernetes cluster. I just spun it up a couple of minutes ago. So there should be give me all pods. So there's nothing deployed yet to my Kubernetes cluster. So what I want to show is how to hook up that cluster into my existing Azure subscription. So first, let's create a new resource group. Let's say AZ group create a dev Munich, and let's create that in West Europe. So currently in public preview, oops, there's some name. That's the name. Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes is right now available in West Europe and East US. So those are the only 2 locations that you can, connect an external Kubernetes to. And I think, Portal needs some thinking time to catch up with my new resource group. So with that resource group in West Europe being deployed at some point in time, it should also come up here in the portal. Let's quickly double check list. There it is. Portal needs some time. Okay,
there it is.
There it is. So right here, we want to bring in our external Kubernetes cluster. In order to do so, we have to prepare the Azure CLI to get access to those preview commands. So what I have already installed is, give me all provider list, and let's grab for Kubernetes. Okay, so I have installed two providers. One is Microsoft.Kubernetes and the other one is Microsoft.Kubernetes.configuration. I did that before because registering a new provider is an asynchronous operation, and it can take several minutes to be, provisioned or enabled in that context. Second thing that you have to install are two extensions. So let's say AZ extension list. And so there's the K8S, that's the fancy short name for Kubernetes configuration, and there is connected K8S. So having those two extensions installed and ensured that you're using the latest version, so there is an AZ extension update yada yada command, and you can update those. Then you get access to the most recent commands in connected AC connected K8S. So this one allows us to bring in an external Kubernetes cluster into our Azure subscription. Just printed the help to get a clean command line, because what's happening when I execute AZ connected K8S connect is it looks at my current Kubernetes context. So I have just one cluster in my demo context right here. And that's critical. If you try to hook up a Kubernetes cluster, you have to ensure that you're already pointing to the cluster that you want to connect. Because if we do AZ connected K8S, I need a shortcut for that one too, connect, we give it a name, let's say name AZ dev Munich K8S, and we want to bring that into our subscription, that's AZ-dev-Munich. What happens now behind the scenes, this command will use Helm CLI, so Helm is the package manager for Kubernetes, and install necessary agents into the Kubernetes cluster that my Kubernetes context is currently pointing to. So let's fire that thing up. That takes a couple of seconds, I guess, or a couple of minutes. And then we can, let's bring up a new instance of the terminal. Okay, I have to, a little bit slower and smaller in the font size. So let's clear up the mess again. And let's look into Kubernetes in a dedicated session, right? So we say, Kubernetes, give me all the namespaces, and we see an Azure Arc namespace appearing here. And if we go into and say, Kubernetes, give me all pods, PO for pods, all deploy, short for deployments, in the namespace Azure-Arc, I think there's a comma missing, then we see that several things are being deployed into our Kubernetes cluster. So there are agents to, grab some logs from to gather basic information about the Kubernetes and all the things that are going on there. And we have resourcing several agents, that were responsible to bring in information about the external cluster into the Azure portal. And on the other hand side, there are agents that were used to interact upon actions you take in Azure portal or by using Azure CLI. So it's in Azure, it's a frictionless deployment from the Azure point of view, because what we end up in Azure, if we refresh over here, is we have a new resource that's of type Kubernetes cluster Azure Arc. So we bring up that, and now we should see an error. Yes, there's an error. And I think that error is still related to this current preview state. Because what the error basically says, it's not able to, display something as long as there's no tag, so an Azure tag assigned to that external Kubernetes cluster. In order to do so, let's use the connected K8S list command, and then we get in Azure CLI the corresponding view to our Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes clusters. So let's grab that name and let's say arc K8s ID equals AZ connected K8s. What I am doing right now, I'm asking for the unique resource identifier of the attached Kubernetes in our AZDev Munich resource group with the name is there. Okay, we want the output in TSV and we want to query for the ID. Okay, let's fire that one up, and then we take a look at echo arc K8s underscore ID. Oops, that's wrong. I forget the $sign. So you see, that's the unique identifier of that particular cloud resource that we have opened over here. And we need that identifier just to assign Azure resource a new tag, and let's add let's say meetup equals Azure Dev Munich. Okay, and we want to assign those tags or this tag to ACR arc K8s underscore ID. Double checking, yeah, looks good. Come on. Okay, so now the resource should be tagged. Let's open up the portal again. Bring that thing in, and we get already some basic information about the external Kubernetes, right? So we can see, hey, the external one is running Kubernetes version 1.17.5, and it also drills the information that there are two nodes in the external Kubernetes cluster. So let's verify that. Let's say Kubernetes, give me all the nodes. And we see there are two Kubernetes nodes running exactly that Kubernetes version. So what can we do with that from right here? So we have just, brought in an external Kubernetes cluster into our Azure portal or into our Azure subscription. So we can put some tags, obviously, on that. We can use Azure policies to that will find their way to Gatekeeper. That's a kind of project in the cloud native computing foundation space that we can again use to do some policy checks inside of the Kubernetes cluster. Obviously, we can use it to do inventory, to have a unified view where I can see all my Kubernetes cluster, no matter in which cloud they run. And I think one of the coolest things is you were able to use GitOps. So if you've ever done some Kubernetes, then you know that there are, I don't know, let's say Kubernetes create secret generic foo from literal bark equals bash, and let's say try run OJaml. So all those hundreds of YAML files, making up your entire application deployment. So we all, or most of our customers, use infrastructure as code to spin up their Kubernetes clusters or to define their Kubernetes clusters. They have those YAML files, like the secret over here, sitting in a repository, but then there was a missing link for a long time. So how, in which order, and with which count, and yada yada, are those YAML files brought into Kubernetes? And that's where GitOps, so Git operations, where that term or that methodology shines. And we can use GitOps to, for example, have a deployment to an AKS, so an Azure Kubernetes service instance, and synchronize that deployment to an external cluster to do a failover or whatever, or to just have a hybrid cluster configuration, where hybrid means running one instance on-prem and the other instance in the cloud, or one instance in Azure and the other one in AWS. So I said the bad word right now, but that's possible. And the good thing is Azure will become your go-to resource, no matter which clouds you have to operate or to administrate, right? So that was one of the biggest announcements from my point of view, to be able to try out and play around with Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes by hitting the public preview stage. The second one was obviously being able to use Windows containers in Kubernetes. Yep, it's GA, but I'm in several projects actually using it, and my advice is to, perhaps you should use it to lift your application into the cloud, but once there, migrate away to Linux containers. So it's possible, but in the current state, there are just too many limitations for Windows containers to be competitive to Linux containers. That starts with size of the image, that starts with resource utilization of the host operating system. So it is possible, yes. I have customers that have the requirement to use or to run Windows workloads in Kubernetes. But once they are there and they see all the problems, they immediately talk about, migrating their workloads to Linux containers. Still running in Azure, but yeah, there's still too many limitations.
Why do they try? Why do they try to bring in Windows containers out? Do they do like old school projects porting to the cloud with a shortcut, or what is the reason to do?
Yeah, it's just there's several motivations why to do that, right? First one obviously is lift and shift, so to bring existing applications up in the cloud and get rid of the rigs sitting in the cellar, right? The other one is just the amount, or the just how huge existing systems are that are tied to full-blown .NET 4. something. And so they can't easily move to .NET Core and follow the nice demo where you just have to write 4 lines in a Docker file and you end up with running on Linux. So that's, we're getting there, but there's still too many code bases being maintained with a tightly cupped to Windows as platform. And I think if you are in the container space, that you, for example, in Kubernetes, there's around the Docker container, there's a concept of a pod. A pod is the smallest unit of work that you can throw at a Kubernetes cluster, and he knows what to do. So you can have multiple containers in one pod. That's so-called sidecar containers. Typical example, you have your web application that logs to standard out and standard error, and then you have a small container just doing a log shipping. Instead of logging to the file system, which is the anti-pattern in a container-based application. So that's easy in Linux because the Fluent Bit, the sidecar container that's responsible to ship the logs, is 33 megabyte in size. And now everyone can go to Docker Hub and double check how big a Windows image is. So there are pitfalls and there are limitations that you immediately hit once you enter the Windows container stage. I mean, it's good to have them in GA. It's a valid migration scenario, but it costs you a lot of money to acquire all those memory and CPU resources, and to spin up enough virtual machines to run, let's say, 10 Windows containers. You need quite a lot of memory, right? I think they reserve like 3.8 gigabytes of RAM per virtual machine. If you spin up an AKS for Windows, you have several virtual machines underneath the hood, right? And if you say, I want to use Windows containers, 3.8 gigs of RAM are reserved for the host operating system. And that's a lot, and you have to pay for it. Whereas on Linux, you don't care about because it's just a few megs it's compared to the 3.8 on Windows, it's way less. So that was from my perspective, in the Kubernetes area, they were the biggest announcements. I mean, they were adopting new Kubernetes versions. There are ongoing in investments right now. So we get the possibility to spin up. So if we do like an AKS create -- help, we get a new feature that we can say enable managed identity, right? So we can say, I want a new cluster and I want a managed identity. So it's like a service account in Azure that's used to execute that service. And that was announced shortly before Build conference. But there's always a system assigned managed identity. And during Build, they agreed again that one of the next features will be user assigned identity, so that administrators or in bigger organizations, the IT department creates just like, let me go over there and you say, come on, give me, come on, bring me up. No, not a new resource group. I want a new resource. I don't use the portal that often. Azure identity. That's not Azure identity, it's identity. Maybe the Azure user assigned managed identity. And then you end up in having a new toolbar. Let's say not code. Yeah, let's put it there. I don't care. And then you have a first-class citizen in your subscription that you can use to hook up role-based access controls and stuff like that, right? And that's something we will get in AKS shortly. That's quite nice. So there were regular announcements regarding cluster auto-scaling and stuff like that. Oh, there was the thing, go to resource. So in a short amount of time, we will be able to, to create or get Azure identities and attach them and say, hey, I want a new AKS, please spin it up and use that identity. That's a huge step, because then, one fits into another. We can use Azure Sentinel to track, permissions or roles assigned to that identity and so on and so forth. So that will be really, really interesting.
Cool.
So let me quickly switch back to Teams. So no, you don't have any questions that someone raised in the meetup page or somewhere else yet?
Haven't seen something so far.
Yeah, if there are any questions, just shout out loud.
Yeah, unmute yourself and ask it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Can we move on to so I stopped presentation or screen sharing right now. Can you share the slide deck perhaps again?
Yeah, well, we'll do for sure.
Because I'm not sure. I think I have the upcoming topic is also mine.
It's IoT.
Oh no, that's not mine.
Okay, sharing my screen. Yes, cool. Everybody is back. Cool. So thanks a lot for that introduction. Always fun to see people running on a console terminal to write stuff, and the magic happens. I like that very much. So I'm using the terminal as well for sure. Okay. Next topic is Azure IoT, and I guess the world we're living in is no more thinkable without having IoT. And that's one reason what Microsoft encouraged to bring out a new certified developer stage, and that one is dedicated to be an IoT developer. You can find it under the exam AZ220, and that one was on beta before Build is now GA. So that's cool. Get certified and bring yourself up to be a certified IoT developer. I also can recommend to do all the other certification, and we've seen a few new ones here. So one of the cool thing is you can go for the Azure Fundamentals, which is the AZ900, if I'm right. One of the often requested things were having virtual networks with IoT Hub working. Why is that? I guess companies want to have their own managed networks around their IoT devices, for instance, to be more secure towards the fact that they're using the public cloud. So this cool feature is now also GA. And then we have one cool thing, Azure IoT Central. I don't know if you're knowing Azure IoT Central. It is like setting up an IoT project at a glance with a click, and you get everything you need. You'll get a page, a web page, or a portal where you can manage your devices. You can analyze your devices. You can bring out messages to your device. You can also manage firmware and that stuff. And now that's been upgraded, and it got templates for supporting Azure Sphere, and IoT Edge integration is now in Azure IoT Central as well. If you don't know what's IoT Edge, for instance, IoT Edge is very important if you want to manage your devices out in the field. And with IoT Edge, which is literally a container system on an edge device in the IoT world, where you can bring out your software, your apps, your logic within that ecosystem. And Azure Sphere is a secured thing to secure your device regarding attacks from outside. So it means taking care of your keys and sensitive data on the device. Use Azure Sphere for. And the last topic in IoT Central is that the diagnostic feature provides now raw data access so that you can easily get the raw data from the diagnostics to do with whatever you want with it, analytics wherever you want. So really cool thing. If you want to start up with an IoT project, go to Azure IoT Central, check it out, and have a start there for your project to be fast available with the IoT connected thing in your cloud. That's it. And if we don't have any questions, I'll move forward, looking to the time consuming here. Okay, seems there are no questions, no comments. That's cool. Developer tools. I like that one too. So the first topic here is also belonging to me. So it's about Azure Static Web App. And I know that Thomas and Torsten just waiting for that topic to discuss it a lot, because for Torsten is, for instance, using the old school way of Static Web App, if I'm right informed. And so now we can do it on a newer way. And I just want to walk through the official Microsoft Learning for that, but I'm not going all the steps through. I just want to show you how cool the new Azure Static Web App is working. And let me start with that. So if you want to use Azure Static Web App, you first have to have a web app. Therefore, I've just cloned the official web app Microsoft is providing for that. You can find all that stuff on Microsoft Learn with Static Web App, and it automatically brings you to the point where you can fork the GitHub repository officially announced by Microsoft. And this is how it looks like, almost, because I've removed other apps here which were written in React and so on, but that's not really needed to have it here. So I decided to remove that stuff. Once you have your repository available, you can go to your Azure portal, and there you will create a static web app. Let's do that. So we have it in preview, which is cool or not cool. So it can have changes over the time, but to check it out, it's really a nice place. Let's create a static web app. What we have to do is we have to select our subscription as you're commonly doing so, and I will create a new resource group for it. And with that new group, I'll set up a static web app and I will name it Azure Dev Demo. I will set it up in West Europe, which is cool. It is in preview and it is available in West Europe. How cool is that? And now you might notice that already there is sign up with GitHub, and that has a reason. You now can attach your web app we've previously seen with your GitHub account right directly into that static web app, and that's really cool. Just go in and select your repository, select the branch you're looking for, and then go to the next step. That step's a bit tricky. You have to know the right directory of your application. So let's double check that. We know it is in Angular apps. So let's set it there. The next thing is we want to have a location where our APIs are located, right? Yes, you can have APIs within that project. So that's pretty cool. And the API will be provided by Azure Functions. I don't know if you've been aware of that, but that's really one of the coolest things here. So the next thing is, what is our artifact applications path, right? So you have to point it to the place where, let's say, the distribution of your application is pointed to. And for sure, this one is pointing to, guessed it, Angular-app. I have no typos in here, so if so, I can go. You can tag your app. I would suggest to do so within, let's say, project environment. Here we leave it out. Let's review it. We have here our GitHub, and we have set everything right. And notice it is a free account where I'm using here, or a free option to use the web app. And now let's create it. You will wonder on how fast that's gonna happen. Within my demo, it was really on finger snap when I was prepping for this demo. Okay, looks like it's set up. And how cool is that? Not exactly set up, but it's on its way. So let's have a look onto our code. What's happening to it? Let's go to our resource first. We have several informations here, and for sure it is notifying us that we're using Azure Web App in preview. Okay, there is one cool thing. It has a deployment history, and there is a link to GitHub Actions. I don't know if you're aware of GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions is a cool way to deploy your GitHub project to everywhere you want to with GitHub Actions. You just code down your YAML file, and with that YAML file, your magic will happen and the deployment process is starting whenever you're checking in something to the branch the GitHub action is observing. We can go there later. Just let's have a look on here. And I would say we should first pull, because I'm assuming that there must be changes, right? And there are changes. Look, there is now this file inside our repository. And what does it say? It says it deploys the app towards our static web app, and it does more, but we'll looking a bit later to that more. So this is a pretty pitfall. Okay, cool. Let's go to our repository and let's see, there are actions in. And if you, I've tried several things here already, and now the GitHub action is already running. We have the code in our repository. We have deployed our application, our resource in Azure. So no reason to wait anymore. And now the build and deployment is happening. So we can jump into that. and it really gives you an overview about what it is doing.
Can you expand the build and deploy?
I'm trying to. I'm clicking on it, but
okay.
it is not doing for it at the moment. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Looks like it is waiting for something.
Yeah, wasn't it saying cute on the overview page?
Let me see.
Azure is like PMs, I guess.
Thorsten has Thorsten eaten up all
Azure resources.
yes.
There we go.
Hey, here you go. Okay. So everything is set up now. Or setting up as it does the linter, it does the NPM stuff for you. And remember, I haven't done anything to put that YAML pipeline or file into my repository. Beside that I've deployed that resource. That's it. And connected this resource to my GitHub. That's cool. It's awesome. I like it very much.
There we go.
There you go. Okay, so what can we do now? We can go now to our resource after deployment, and it looks like it is here. And what it also has done during the deployment is it was able to provide my APIs. So within the project, you might recognize that there is a folder /API. And within that API folder, bring it back to you here, I have defined some APIs. So it is just a demo project, and it is based upon what John Papa was showing us on the build. So you literally have here inside Azure Functions. And Azure Functions can be tiny as these are by using Node.js for configuration or programming it. So this is the function to delete a product, and here you've got the function with the possibility to load all the products we've seen in the background. And to do so, we just have to say here that our method is get, and we have to set up the route, and we for sure have to set up the route within our Angular application. So once that's done, and in the Angular application, ngrx is inside, so that also takes care about implementing the APIs for me after configuring. We are ready to use our Angular application. Really a short time. You haven't have to take care about the application deployment itself, and you have the ability to use it on a glance really fast. There's one more thing. When you do a API, when you do a branch, the intelligence of GitHub and GitHub Actions brings a nice feature to you together with Azure. It will set up that branch for you once you've pushed that to the cloud. And what it does then also is it provides you a preview link of that branch. That means you can see all your changes of that branch in the same application or resource, but with a preview link to it. I won't demo that yet because it is time consuming and I want to keep it short. But I guess that's an amazing stuff, isn't it, Thorsten?
Yep. Finally, they were catching up with things like Netlify. I mean, something that I wanted to point out is that you don't have to use Azure Functions at all. So my first try was obviously to, get rid of the Azure Functions in the static web app, because I mean, my personal blog is a static web app. So I use just a plain old generator to do so. And I have no functions. So that's possible. You don't have to use Azure functions in static web apps. That's, I think, important to know. The other thing is in preview, repositories are limited to a size of 100 megabytes. And that's a little bit misleading because it's not the distribution, it's the overall repository size. Because my blog was a little bit bigger because of all the visual assets and stuff like that, right? The images. And so I hit immediately the point that the server said, nope,
damn it.
Not you. So yeah, it's definitely a nice service, but I think what Microsoft has to optimize is adopting new users. So if I'm not an Azure customer at all, how do I get onto that platform, right?
Yep.
Because creating an Azure account means you have to put in your credit card, even though you're running on the free tier. And that's where all the other services shine right now, because you can just put in, let's say, PayPal or start for free. And if they get that one right too, then Azure static web apps can or will be a competitor for all those other services. But within the scope of Azure, I like it. It was, I mean, we had the possibility to use that premium storage accounts to host static apps in storage accounts in a special folder, which is also quite useful. But yeah, having a dedicated service is definitely the right choice.
Yes, I would say the same. And it enables you to use things like service principal or so if you need for authorization and so on. So that brings, in my opinion, also the ability for virtual networks, bringing up some security for that and so on. You having to deal with the old school, let's say, blob storage stuff to bring up this.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, the blob storage stuff was really nice, but it always felt like it was a temporary solution because they couldn't get out a real product fast enough. While things like Angular and React, they are just static web files, right? So it's nice to see a dedicated product for that. Which also deals with stuff like routing, because in storage, so when you have an Angular app or a React app, you have normal paths in the URL that need to be rerouted back to the JavaScript file, and what's in the storage blob storage. You basically always get a 404 error before it gets redirected back. So yeah, again, this was nice, but it's about time they have a proper product for this.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're
I
right.
mean, interesting will also be if or how they add Azure CDN in front of the service, and if you have control over the CDN instance. So there's still some, let's say, question marks that has to be answered during the preview phase. But yeah, it looks promising so far. Being able, if you think about just a simple website, you can just code your contact form logic in an Azure function, pump the data to the Cosmos DB stuff that we will see in a couple of minutes. So yeah, it has to become a no-brainer, and I think that's the direction we're heading to.
Yeah. Well, that said, and bringing up GitHub and GitHub Actions, I guess the next step is not that far away to come up with Visual Studio and GitHub code spaces, Thorsten. Come on. Share
exactly.
Yeah,
let me quickly share the screen again. And,
yeah, bear a sec. I have to switch. Yeah, cool.
Let me choose, this account. Sie haben sich yeah, exactly, great. That was what I don't wanted to do. Log off from the, so let's go to Visual Studio Code Spaces. Sign in again. So nope, I want a private account. Let me quickly authenticate.
Hopefully two-factor.
Yeah, obviously. I have to grab my phone. Okay, there we go. So basically sign in, yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, identity crisis. Having multiple identities in Microsoft is still not the easiest, not the best choice, right? So what is Visual Studio Code Spaces and correspondingly GitHub Code Spaces? So underneath the hood, there is an engine called Monaco that we have been using for years right now. That is also, building the basement of the editor in Visual Studio Code. And the idea is to, take your Visual Studio Code or your editor with you, no matter where you are. If you are in a browser, in an I don't know if that's still a thing, in an internet cafe, is that still a thing? But it doesn't matter if you are in some situation where perhaps you don't want to, set up all the requirements to work on a certain repository, you can just create a so-called code space. And a code space is just a virtual machine where I can, choose from different sizes, and I can point it to a GitHub repository. So, for example, just /search. I think that should be a valid one. Yep. And I can say, hey, put it asleep after that amount of time. I can link my dot files. And there's an install script. Yep, that's the default path. That's fine. Let's move that a little bit away. And let's say create. So what it actually does, it acquires a virtual machine that I have to pay for, obviously. But then as you can see, it spins out Visual Studio Code in the browser, and behind the scenes, it will pull the so the project repository from GitHub, which was search-torsten-hans.com. And then it will pull my dot files, also living on GitHub, and configure my terminal experience in Visual Studio Code as I have it on my local machine. So not exactly as I have it on my local machine, because I haven't pushed my changes that you've seen earlier, because I have a new theme. But anyways, I can make this environment my very own environment, and I can quickly contribute to a project no matter which dependencies that project is living on, right? So that search project is, if I remember correctly, it's an Azure function that uses Node.js to talk to Azure Cognitive Search. But perhaps I don't have a Node.js setup on my machine. So I can specify a .dev container JSON file in that repository and say, hey, in that context, I need a Linux machine with Node.js installed in a certain version, or with different tools installed, to everything that makes my project environment work. So I'm right here in Visual Studio Code in my browser. I can click all those stuff away, and as you can see, that it has successfully checked out my my code. And if I bring up the terminal, that looks a little bit weird. Let's go somewhere there. I don't have yet. It's still behind the scenes. It's still provisioning my dot files, because it takes some while to do that asynchronously. So I will end up with my terminal experience. Let me quickly switch to the other one that I have, the other code space for my blog. So that's suspended. So it went asleep because I wasn't using it for 5 minutes. So I just have to pay for the storage for the virtual machine and not for the virtual machine itself. And yeah, we should be there in a couple of seconds. What can we do with that in the meantime? Yeah, we can use it in the browser. We can use Visual Studio Code the app on your system and connect it to the server, and that's using the Visual Studio remote tools behind the scenes.
You can now code in your.
Yeah, exactly. That was my intention too. Writing a blog post in VS Code, that's how you do it in static site gens, right? You have all your blog posts over here and you write it nicely in Markdown. That's how we roll with static sites. You can do it from everywhere, but the problem is right now, not all mobile browser engines are fully supported yet. So Safari Mobile still have some glitches when it comes to IntelliSense and syntax highlighting and stuff like that. But basically, that's the idea. And it goes beyond that. So currently in private preview, if I remember correctly, is code spaces for full-blown Visual Studio. So you don't have to use a, 3K, 4K laptop to do your .NET development anymore. The cheapest and most crappy Windows notebook is able to do so by offloading the computing, the compute to the cloud, but still having all the goodness that the local tooling gives you. So there are a lot of possibilities. And in contrast, there is GitHub code spaces, which uses the same configuration, the same tooling, but just integrates into GitHub. So that's always that decision that you have to make, right? Is it perhaps a personal project and you're living in the GitHub area, then you can use GitHub code spaces. It is underneath the same system. Or do you have an Azure Active Directory account or a personal Azure account like I have, then I can use Visual Studio code spaces. Unfortunately, my request to join the GitHub code spaces preview hasn't been accepted yet, so I can't demonstrate that one because the integration is a little bit nicer, right? You can go to GitHub something, and you have a code button over here, or no, it's over here. The clone button says code, and you click on it, and it spins up Visual Studio Code, basically, right inside that page. And that's immersive. And I mentioned that container, dev container file. So you see, I can say everyone who wants to contribute using Visual Studio code spaces and fires up a code space for my repository will automatically get those extensions installed with those settings. So in the meantime, that should have loaded. There seems to be some glitch, but because normally the activity bar over here should be in the accent color, which is a nice pink. But that's basically the idea. And I can do port forwarding. So in Visual Studio 5, in Visual Studio Code, I can just hit F5 and debug my web app by just leveraging port forwarding. And that's really, really insane. And if it's even complexer, you can say, please, in your dev container JSON, use a certain Docker container as runtime. So I think that's definitely a game changer because it enables people in other markets to start contributing on bigger projects, so they don't have to buy a MacBook for $4,000 or so. They can just use their Chromebook and fire up and use it and offload the huge amount of compute to the cloud. So and that's why I think that Visual Studio Code Spaces will definitely be a game changer. And if your organization has computing power on-prem, you can hook up on-premise virtual machines too and have a secure connection from everywhere into your organization to work on your repositories. So also governance is a topic that maybe led us towards code spaces.
Nice one. I was also impressed by the demo they've done on the build. It takes some time to spin up the machine, and they immediately started to bang a little to complain, and then they rethought about that, complaining that we're going to fire up a whole machine for developing stuff, and that's within a minute, 60 seconds at least to spin up that machine. Can't complain about that. It's really fast, right? It's really amazing what the time takes us to.
I think they're still facing a couple of issues because of Visual Studio Code spaces originally, or their origin is those remote development tools in Visual Studio Code. And so they have slightly different configuration aspects. However, the underlying scheme always treats developer that your dev container JSON is invalid. That was annoying. That was a little bit annoying to me, at least. So there's still room for improvement, but yeah, we are that are actually first world problems. You know, if spinning up the machine takes 60 or 65 seconds, right?
Yes. That's it. Looking to the time and having Thomas waiting for his portion of today, let's run through Azure Active Directory or security on Azure at a glance. Thorsten.
Can you just share the slide deck? I will be.
Oh yeah, I will do so.
I'll run through that in a minute. I promise.
You have to promise that to Thomas.
Okay, I promise.
All good, all good.
Okay, here we go.
Azure Active Directory, we have several new announcements. Personally, for me, external identities, so bringing in Google accounts, one-time mails, or new in preview Facebook accounts is definitely interesting for all the folks working with Azure Active Directory. That's something you have to check out. Second thing is a topic that annoyed me for years, and that's how I do authentication against Azure Active Directory in ASP.NET web applications. Finally, there is a NuGet package that can bring in the code to get that authentication stuff happening. Because up until build, we had to, copy the code into our project, so we had to maintain it. And that's finally a manageable dependency from my point of view. It was a small announcement, but personally, it was the biggest one for me.
Yeah. Wasn't that external identities, wasn't that a feature in Azure Active Directory B2C before?
Yeah.
Exactly. So you had to have to spin up Azure Active Directory B2C, which means business to customer instance, to have a integration of Twitter accounts, Facebook, and so on, Google accounts. That was really a pitfall too, because the managing of that Active Directory, which is nothing more than a new tenant,
exactly.
Yes, was annoying as well.
Is bringing those external identities into a normal AD designed to replace Azure AD B2C?
I don't think so, or at least I don't know. So I don't know if they want to replace B2C. I mean, from the overall experience, you have all the users in one place. That's the benefit, because right now in these times you have to onboard users very quickly to collaborate on certain services and things running in a given Azure tenant, and maybe you don't have the experience to operate Azure B2C yet, because that's different service, different pricing, SLA, stuff like that. So I don't know if the idea is to replace B2C, or if it's just unifying the experience of onboarding.
Right.
Me neither. I would, but the Azure Active Directory B2C was a long time in preview, and I'm not sure if it is yet today. But it's not that easy to deal with that stuff too. I remember. Well.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's sad, and we wanted to heat over to get Thomas working. I have to share the slide deck again.
I'd appreciate it, yeah.
Oh,
all right.
Here we go with Azure Mixed Reality.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just going to run through a few tidbits that Microsoft announced during Build. So Azure Mixed Reality, there's a good news that Azure Spatial Anchors is now generally available. So this is a very cool feature or service to share physical locations across different devices and maps. So think of augmented reality apps if you have two devices and want to share a digital virtual object or to be shown in the same location. This is the service for you. Microsoft announced that HoloLens will be shipping this fall to a few more countries. Luckily, in Germany, we already are being served.
A few of us.
Can you move on?
Oh yeah, for sure. Sorry.
No worries. So this was also a small announcement that Microsoft reserves for themselves some bragging rights regarding building the 5th most powerful supercomputer in the world, which is the first one to actually leverage the power of the cloud. And they built this one exclusively for the OpenAI consortium. So this is a non-profit organization that's looking into how AI will transform the world, basically. What are the dangers? What are the opportunities? And so this is a organization that's backed by Microsoft and I think Elon Musk mostly. And they will be using the supercomputer to do all their calculations. And then there were some news around Azure Quantum. They started with the Azure Quantum service as a limited preview for a select number of customers, which we are not among, I guess, most of us at least. But if you're interested in the whole quantum computing theme, then you can actually get started learning about Q# and what it takes to write programs for quantum computing and get a head start on this through the new learning modules. Then we have a larger topic and the thing that I was most excited about in the Azure data space. So first off, we have some announcements around Cosmos DB, which I guess a lot of people aren't using because it's just super expensive, or at least it was. So if you go to the next slide, this is actually one of the projects I'm working on, and this is a basic Cosmos DB account where you can see we have 9 collections. And what used to be the case is you had. Can you go back to the screenshot? Oh, thanks. You had to pay a fixed price for each collection that you created. So for 9 collections, I had to at least allocate 900 of these request units, Microsoft calls them, which cost me, or does cost me actually, around $50 a month, regardless of how much I actually use the database. So you see the one collection that has that's called versions. This collection just has one document in there that's getting updated almost never, and this document has a few kilobytes and costs me around $50 a year, just because I don't want to put this into another collection that's where it doesn't belong. So this situation, I just explained this so you can understand my excitement about the new announcements. If you go to the next slide. So one thing is Cosmos DB announced an autopilot mode, because up till now you basically had to reserve these request units, and this was a static value, and you had these, then you were paying for them, but there was no way to automatically scale this. So this was all already really weird for a cloud service. So now you can actually define a maximum amount of request units that your Cosmos DB can take, and it will automatically scale down to 10% of the maximum value. But be aware that the autopilot request units, how they call it, are actually more expensive than if you set a fixed amount. And the other thing, which is way more important, is that they are introducing a truly serverless pricing, meaning that you will only pay for what you're actually using, which is way overdue. So if you don't actually hit the database, you're just paying for the storage. And I guess, so there's no announcement of how much it will actually cost, and it will be in preview soon. I guess there will be some trade-offs where you have to think if you want to use the serverless pricing, or if you're better off buying a fixed amount of request units. But especially for things like development or staging environments where you don't actually have a lot of users, this will most likely be way, way cheaper than what we have to pay now. Moving on to some other Cosmos DB news. So you can now bring your own keys for end-to-end encryption of your data, which were or are usually managed by Microsoft, the keys. They have a new recovery feature for point-in-time backup and restore. The Java SDK has been updated to version 4, really important. The full database operation history is now in the change feed. So if something changes in the container, you have a list of things that happen to the container. And up until now, you only saw data sets. Okay, this data set got modified or created at a certain point in time, but you weren't able to see when a data set was deleted. And you also weren't able to see if what modification has been made. So was it a create, was it a modify, or was it a delete? And this has also now been added. So you have a way clearer view of how your data was manipulated. And then the Jupyter Notebook support for Python and C# was also introduced.
Is the recovery of data now for endless time available? Or
I actually don't know what the exact specifications of that one are. Okay. But I guess I think Cosmos DB with all the new changes might be an interesting topic for another meetup, because there's so much to explore with that.
Yeah. I guess the bounds between autopilot mode or, let's say, setup specified RUs versus serverless pricing could be that performance is not the same, like using the guaranteed performance on the one hand, or going for serverless with not 100% guaranteed performance, which is the
absolutely. But with the reserved, I guess so. Cosmos DB scales in a way that with the reserved units you can basically take on Amazon, but if you want to have a lower volume site, yeah, it's mostly overpowered with the reserved request units. But I guess that's definitely something that one needs to look into, how much the auto scaling and the serverless pricing affects your performance. Definitely.
Yeah. For the ones outside don't knowing what request units are, it's a guaranteed. Let's say if you have 100 RUs, you may do 100 requests towards the Cosmos DB per second, because the RU is measured within seconds. Are you exceeding the 100 requests, it automatically will be queued to the next second where the RUs are free again, let's say. That's the way Cosmos DB is guaranteeing the performance for, let's say, IoT interactions and live streams.
Yeah. It's a combination of request and the
size of the package
that you're requesting. Yeah.
I know I wanted to simplify it a little.
Our reviewers are smart. They don't need simplification. All right. Moving on to Azure Database for PostgreSQL, or however you want to pronounce it, and MySQL. And so they both now support Azure Active Directory authentication, which is really cool. Private link is generally available for both. You can do a 3-year reserved instance pricing. So if you want to make sure that for the next 3 years your prices are stable, you can do that. And you can also bring your own keys for data encryption at rest with your own customer managed keys, which is available in preview in June.
Cool.
And then we have Azure SQL Edge, which is a low footprint SQL engine designed to especially for IoT workloads. So you can store and analyze like these time series data on the edge before you actually ship it to the cloud. And this is especially interesting if you're using SQL already in the cloud and want to use it on the edge because you have the same tool set, the same skills. And this is also in public preview now. And this one, I think, Ralph, you can also take.
Okay, so Azure Synapse. Azure Synapse is a tool where you can analyze data at a glance in one tool, bringing up nice charts, doing stuff and turnaround and so. They've made now new features available in preview, which is showing on this slide here. And not that is the only thing I want to share with you. Now you can have Azure Synapse with a direct link, and that means you do not have to copy anymore the data from your production database towards a data warehouse where you do your analytics in. You can do now real-time analytics within your database, because you can now use Azure Synapse link to connect Azure Synapse towards your production database to get real-time insights into your data and have a better overview about your business there. So that's really awesome, I guess, as well as all the other news we've shared with you. I have to admit that I have fucked up with one topic, and that was really the one with the bonsai, with the tiny tree. That project is dedicated towards autonomous driving and machine training. So please don't get me wrong. I've mistaken that one towards by misleading saying. So it is made for autonomous driving, bringing that forward, and is really an awesome project you have to check out, just to correct that saying. So that's a wrap. It's done. So we've brought up all the most important for us, topics. So I have to admit that one is not really the stuff they've shown on Build, because Build was really a huge load of information by 48 hours, and I don't know how many sessions. That was really awesome. I've seen in several other events they announcing for 2021, they go for virtual as well, if you've been noticing that as well.
Yeah, all the next events from Microsoft until, as far as I know, will be virtual. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I think they can't get rid of the virtual part anymore. I still think they will return to physical, but
yeah,
like live streaming the sessions, why wouldn't they?
Yeah, and it's cheaper, better for the environment. So multiple reasons. Can I add two things that weren't mentioned?
For sure.
Small favorite things.
Yeah.
One is we came out with the public preview for Azure SQL Edge. So for Edge solution with IoT. So if you want to store data locally in a Edge device before, for example, you synchronize.
We've said that.
Sorry. Oh, you said that. Okay. I missed that one. And the other one I really liked, which is not even in preview yet, but it was shown in a session, is the Logic Apps. Logic Apps now run in the Azure Functions runtime. So you can develop a Logic app and deploy it to a function app, to app service, right? So I thought that was really awesome. And with that, you gain the advantages of functions. For example, you can have stateless and stateful logic apps. The interesting thing here is that you can have stateless logic apps, which are much faster than a stateful logic app, because it's not persisting the state at every single activity that it executes. So if you want to have low latency or lower latency scenarios, you can use stateless logic apps, which is cool.
Since Azure Durable Functions, I got rid of the most of my logic apps, I must say.
But this builds precisely on that. And it's much simpler to do a logic app than to use a durable function.
You're right.
The API model is not exactly the friendliest, in my opinion.
For all the beginners out there, a logic app can be designed within a more or less nice designer within the browser, so you don't have to write any line of code. You have to understand on how HTTP and REST APIs and that stuff is working, and you maybe have a rough idea about if then that. But with that knowledge, you can set up a small application doing things you want. If then. Cool. Okay. I don't have to attach anything more to that. And I very much appreciated your mentionings here, Jota, which is always having fun, you on site. And towards Torsten, George, and Thomas, thank you very much for being here and bringing all your knowledge into the community, which I really appreciated very much, especially on our first birthday. We don't have to forget that one. So if you're already prepped, open your beer now virtually with me, or just show it, and let's go and have a virtual prosit for that. It's blurred.
It's blurred.
Flash alert.
There's some AI mechanism identifying this beer in the stream. Let's get rid of that. Yeah.
That's some Microsoft engineer getting drunk on daytime calls.
That's cool. Oh, awesome.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. And if you have an upcoming meeting where we need a speaker, just reach out and then we can arrange something.
I will do for sure. Thanks a lot. And George as well, it was nice having you on site. You hadn't had that much time to, or you were very silently in the last 40 minutes, but I guess for reasons.
Yeah. I mean, so many topics. I had to rush up in the beginning, the first hour or so, to finish all C#9 and Blazor and EF Core and all of these things. I think it's very difficult to wrap everything that is what was said in a MSBuild in just 2 hours, right?
It is impossible.
All of us had to do a small part, talk fast, and get it done. But in any case, I think we mentioned the most important things, and yeah, hopefully I enjoyed it, and thank you for having me here, Ralph.
For sure, it is a pleasure on our side. Yeah, and you all there, don't miss to subscribe to this channel if you've been following us all the time. You can go then backward to the point we want to go and have a look onto the topic you're most of interesting in and share your opinions with us. And if you don't have any more questions with our live audition here, we're going to close the meetup for tonight. And thanks for joining us.
And thanks, Clive, for hosting.
For sure, it's a pleasure. Stay safe. Stay at home.
All right.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Bye.